How we doing, folks? This is Adam Godin, and I'm here for a special video where I'm going to discuss the pandemic a little bit. And no need to tag this as COVID safety or information about COVID. I'm just talking about implications to mental health. And I wanted to touch on mental health in general because I've had experience with mental health, and I think that would really benefit people to inform people. So I'll just start by saying, the pandemic, mental health is a real thing, right? So there's a physical disorders and then there's mental disorders. And there's so much discrimination against people with mental disorders because it makes it seem like there's something personally wrong with them, that they have this. It could be depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. It implies there's something wrong with their mental state. They call it a mental illness when it's a brain illness. So what is mental illness? What causes mental illness? It's the neurotransmitter imbalance in your brain. We have serotonergic neurotransmitters, dopaminergic neurotransmitters. We have neurotransmitters that raise our blood pressure. We have nicotinic receptors. We have all sorts of receptors in our brain, right? Endocannabinoid receptors. And our brain is filled with receptors, which is substances that are able to pass through and act as agonists. And so, um, if you take a drug and it amplifies, it's like a key. Imagine there's the serogenic, the 5-HT receptors, there's the serotonin receptors. Imagine it's like a key, and you have is the perfect key that unlocks it. But only serotonin, the neurotransmitter, can be the one that unlocks it. But there's so many vast consequences of the behavior of someone with the imbalance of dopamine and serotonin in particular. Although there are other neurotransmitters, those are ones of note, particularly the D1 receptor and the D2 receptor and the implications. Well, all I mean by receptor is, imagine there's a lock, right? And dopamine, this neurotransmitter, this little small thing that's not observable, and you look really, really closely, it fits in like a key. And then once it fits in the key, it unlocks something, right? It opens the door. That's what it does. So, and I heard my cat fighting, and I don't know what that was. So I just had to look and just check what that was. But on a more serious note, mental illness is debilitating. Did I just pull it? Debilitating. So what I'm saying is, so many people suffer from mental illness, and even if they're not diagnosed, they may suffer from it. It affects every facet of their lives. People may have ADHD, hard to focus, and so hard to focus that they may not even be able to drive well because you can't focus. It's just so. It's such a life impairing thing to have a mental illness. Someone with bipolar, they may have mania and psychosis, and I want to let you know that I think that there's so much discrimination against people with bipolar in particular because people don't understand mania or hypomania or how that works. See, all it is that people with bipolar have different brains, and it's not their fault, and it's a physical disorder. So when I recently encountered a blog online, and someone was talking about mental illness in a very disrespectful way. I don't think people don't understand mental illness. Like, we have so many social issues that we have awareness for, and that we're all on board for, that are like considered like a travesty to like point out or criticize. But how come we're allowed to criticize people with mental illness? We're allowed to degrade them, right? Like, why it is people have no idea what it's like to live a life of mental illness when your soul is doing one thing and your brain is preventing you from doing that, and which medicine can prevent or treat and never heal but treat and alleviate symptoms and just live a normal life. People with bipolar, if they get psychotic from mania, they could do things that they wouldn't even remember. They get not necessarily violent. And I think there's such a negative stereotype of bipolar that they're violent, and that if someone meets someone they disclose bipolar, there's this violence. And I think the media is very irresponsible in their portrayal of mental illness in their broadcasts, particularly after a school shooting. Like, you know, a lot of the times when you see a school shooting, and we don't see them too much right now because of the pandemic, it is obviously a terrible thing. Nothing ever is, can be funny that can come out of a school shooting. I mean, it's a disgraceful, it's a heinous, I think we can all agree that act of, evil. So, but I think that when it comes to mental illness, um, it's a physical disorder, right? So, like, if someone had if someone had, I'm not even going to name specific illnesses because I don't want to be insensitive to people who may actually have these illnesses. But imagine if you have a certain illness, like you name any illness that's related to your body, your brain, and people wouldn't discriminate and be like, okay, this is that they have this, but it's not their fault, right? It's not their fault because it's a physical disorder. It could be a life impairing, quality of life impairing issue. So with bipolar, there's so much discrimination that, you know, if whenever there's a school shooting or whatever, I mean, obviously, it's a real thing. I'm going to put it in air quotes, but I mean, what I'm saying is that how the media portrays school shooting, and they connote that to mental illness. So I should have, used the air quotes for mental illness and school shooting. So, forgive my inaccurate or imprecise use of my finger quotes. But what I'm saying, folks, just to keep on topic, what I'm saying, folks, is that when you hear the school shootings, they always mental illness, mental illness, mental illness, and it's really a big disservice to the mental illness community. Work hard to educate people about what mental illness is about. When we're constantly, every time there's a school shooting, and obviously a horrible thing, we can all agree to that. I mean, it's disgusting, right? So, but every time, I mean, virtually every time, I want to say that there's always this mental illness, mental illness. What happens is when people are constantly whenever their only interaction with the constant mental illness through the media when it has these school shootings, or like when people watch this, it creates this fear, this stereotype of people with mental illness, like, oh my god, like they're gonna, oh my gosh, they're gonna come, do very violent things or be a violent person or be an untrustworthy person. And I've been diagnosed with mental illness growing up, I'm trying to be an authentic person. It's something I don't normally only disclose to personal, person, people, I know acquaintances, friends, but I'm authentic with my followers, and I don't want people to feel less alone, and that I've been diagnosed with mental illness, and I have struggled, and that it's so it's so close-minded and judgmental um to make fun of the mental illness as if it's like it's nothing to make fun of. I know that there's no other word to describe it. It's a serious. It's as worse as any disease we can have. I mean, it is very life impairing to have mania. To have mania and to be it feels like you have no control of your body. You have irrational decision making. You might be psychotic and hallucinating, delusional, not thinking straight, communicating with different entities. And when you hear the media, the mental illness, this school shooting, it creates this fear, this stereotype of, oh, we have to fix mental illness, but it's always in the context of the media of school shooting. It makes it seem like, oh, if you have mental illness, you're just school up a shoot up a school, and it's irresponsible in media, but I think more than that, it's just ignorance. It's more ignorance than it is, disrespectful, because people don't understand what it's like to live a life of bipolar or schizophrenia or depression. And if you've never experienced something, you're not going to be able to relate to it or have empathy for it or connect with that. And anyone who has lived the life of mental illness can attest to the fact that your actions have nothing to do with you. It's at a fundamental level. Your brain is imbalanced, which is causing these propositions and or predispositions, I should say, and ways of being, and just how you represent the world. So I think mental illness is so mischaracterized, and we have to be more open to mental illness. But the thing is that when we bring up mental illness, we can't make it seem like we have to have strict boundaries of what mental illness is. That if someone is saying something about mental illness that's disrespectful, to stop them, and say, excuse me, you can see how that would be disrespectful to the mental health community. Like, oh, he's crazy. Why would I want some crazy person doing this? That's vastly, disrespectful. I mean, I am vastly successful. I'm going to say it in that way, but throughout my life, everything I've set my mind to have accomplished, and I have been extremely successful in everything I'm doing, and I'm blessed to have that, and I've overcome a lot of adversity, and when I hear people mock mental illness or especially bipolar or something like schizophrenia, it's very unnerving. Um it makes you realize that it's more than ignorance, but we have to educate, and by educating we're healing, and that with the pandemic that so many people are depressed. I guess I think so many people have things that can be diagnosed mental illness, but they have undiagnosed mental illness. There's so many people that have mental illnesses. So it's just a disrespect of mental illness. And we all know someone who suffers in some shape, way, or form. But especially with the pandemic, um, there's been a lot of tolls to the mental health of people, and that people, with all, hey honey, come on, stop. Man, my dog's chirping at me, but with a lot of the uncertainty and ambiguity of life going around, in everyday life, it makes a very stressful circumstance, and stress can exacerbate mental illness. And like I said, we all may have undiagnosed mental illnesses, and so many of us just others do, and we just have to understand that, like, we there's nothing personally wrong. Like, there's nothing. They say mental illness, it's very misleading. It should be called a neurological illness, because not take away the word mental. It should not be called mental illness, neurological illness. And we have to stop bringing up mental illness every time there's a source shooting. Sometimes it's just evil people. Sometimes it's just evil people that has nothing to do with mental illness. Okay, so we have to stop mischaracterizing bipolar. We have to be open to people who bring up bipolar. We have to be non-judgmental. We can't. It can't be a stigma to bring up bipolar. We can't bring up bipolar. If someone admits bipolar, it can't be like in the room, like, oh, he's bipolar. Like, like that's the vibe in the room. It can be like, oh, he's bipolar. Good for him. And I mean, so change the sentiment. If you bring up the very topic of mental illness, because it's a neurological illness, it's your brain, and has nothing to do, mental, and almost is this kind of connotation to your personality, your mind, right? Like your mental, your mind, right? So, but it's not your mind. There's nothing wrong with your mind. It's a neurological disorder. So, be respectful of the people's mental illness. When people bring it up, if you mock it, that makes you a very ignorant person. You should really correct your behavior. And anyone who disrespects bipolar or schizophrenia or depression or anxiety or any other mental illness, anyone who mocks it, I pray for them. I'm not gonna judge them, because they're just ignorant and they don't know what they do. But I think people don't understand how hurtful that is, and for people who have overcome mental illnesses like that and who are extremely successful people, and to use the word crazy is such a horrible word to depict. It just, a bipolar person, or etc. It plays in that stereotype that, like, bipolar is crazy. People that have no self control. People who have bipolar, who have success, who are are functional, have a high quality of life, there's nothing wrong. Like, there's no reason to avoid people like that. We're honestly, people who are bipolar are probably the coolest people ever. They're brilliant, they're creative, they're funny, and and they got their situation straight. So just really want to emphasize, if you hear someone say something about mental illness in a negative way, really speak out. And I'm really begging you, speak out. And even if that makes you the odd one out, like, the people will respect you even more for being the odd one out. You have to speak up. Enough of this. I can't read this message for them, that I'm reading, and have people bash mental illness and say people are crazy. It's disgusting. We have to start seeing bipolar and schizophrenia in the same realm as we would physical disorders that are just as life threatening. And so and the average lifespan of people with these mental illnesses is a lot lower too. So I mean, you're not only that, but you're mocking. If you disrespect bipolar schizophrenia, you're mocking people. I mean, there are like 12 years less in the lifespan for people who take bipolar. You're mocking someone for their genetic makeup. And that's disgusting. And I hope you realize how disgusting that is. If anyone has seen that, who's mocked bipolar, who thinks that it makes them crazy, who avoids them. I've had mental illness. I'm doing just fine. Anyway, Dan, see you later.